wherever you are and whenever you are. Welcome, good souls of the planet and beyond, to Paranormal Now. I'm Alan B. Smith. Join us as we traverse the cosmic highway of paranormal portals and tantalizing turnoffs. Our guests tonight are Heidi Hollis and Maureen Seaberg to discuss Machine Empaths and synesthesia, because humans are connecting with technology and technology is reaching back. Yeah, this is going to be a very interesting night indeed. So I can't wait to get Heidi and Maureen on here. They will join us in about 30 minutes. Coming up in just a moment is Dr. Joseph Burkes. He's been on the program before, but tonight we'll be discussing something different, and that is the COVID-19 virus. So stand by for that. Please share your thoughts and experiences with us during or after the show on Facebook.com/ParanormalNowRadio, Twitter @Paranormal_now, and join us in the KGRA chat room where you can pose your questions for our guests. Now, I've posted a new video for Fun with Ufology, video covering the Chicago O'Hare UFO incident, and that is on Paranormal Pop on YouTube. So just go to youtube.com/paranormalpop. Check out the new video. If you like it, please like, comment, subscribe. My dream is to get to 500 subscribers by this summer. So that would appreciate your help in any capacity. All right. Also, the Paranormal Radio app lines are open tonight in the second hour to call in and ask our guests your question. So if you have a question for Heidi or Maureen, just call 85-KGRA live. That's 855-472-5483. Joseph Burkes, MD, is a board-certified internal medicine physician, now in retirement. In addition to his many years of practicing medicine, he volunteered as a working group coordinator of the Close Encounters of the Fifth Initiative from 1992 to 98. He has continued to study the flying saucer phenomena, working with MUFON, the Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial and Extraordinary Encounters, and the Peruvian Contact Network, now called RAMA. Joseph Burkes, MD, is co-author of the book Paths to Contact, edited by Jeff Baker. He also has co-authored a chapter of UFO Medical Healings with researcher Preston Dennett in the free compendium Beyond UFOs. But really, the reason Dr. Burkes is on tonight is to discuss the coronavirus crisis that we're in. Dr. Burkes, welcome to Paranormal Now again.
Thanks for having me on your show.
Absolutely. So there are so many unanswered questions, I think. And before we get to all that, what would you say to so many of us, including myself, that are struggling because of the effects of an economic shutdown for the most part and the fear of contagion? Do you have any personal advice for people?
In terms of the fear concerning economic shutdown, I'm as lost as anyone else, because what we're going through is unprecedented well, for most of us, or a living memory. I think the prospect of the economy contracting with unemployment reaching 10, 15, 20% in a short period of time, the only period that was experienced was 80, 90 years ago during the Great Depression. So I can't really counsel people other than the fact that you're not in this alone. The government is making initial steps to help people, and one just has to be hopeful and keep busy and try to focus on the positive. As far as the medical issues that we're confronting, a lot of that is unknown as well. We don't have sufficient information because the United States is lagged in the testing process, which would allow us to identify how many people are infected. We do know that there are hot spots all around the country, and we all have heard on radio and television, social media, something like 70 or 80 million Americans live in states where social distancing is being encouraged and all kinds of economic activity are being curtailed. Whether this will actually prevent the virus from overwhelming our medical facilities, we're in the process of discovering that, even as I speak, in New York City and perhaps soon in other cities as well, as the number of cases increase. So I don't have a lot of encouragement. I think we have tremendous resources that are addressing this problem. Fortunately, it's only hitting a few major metropolitan areas at this time, and hopefully the rest of the country, if they are going to have spread, which is in my mind almost certain, they will come when greater medical resources will be available in the weeks and months to come.
Well, here in New York City, we're just out recently to do food shopping, and they were regulating the number of people entering the store at a time. So there was a line outside the store, and people of their own accord, mind you, kept in the line, kept a good, I would say 4 to 6 feet away from each other. And this line was wrapping all the way down an avenue. So it was really long because of that. And I thought that was commendable that people were mindful. No one was directing them to do that. So that was encouraging.
Yes, that is encouraging. Of course, it would be better if we all had our own protection in terms of face masks.
Well, we did, yes. And I would say probably 30% of the people had some sort of protection.
Good. And for those who don't, a scarf is better than nothing. And keeping that distance, of course, is important. And don't stand in line under any circumstances if you're feeling ill.
Which is more valuable? Wearing a mask to prevent the spreading, or wearing a mask to prevent catching the virus?
The mask has both purposes. If someone is ill, they should not be in the line. They should be in isolation and should wear a mask only when going to a medical facility to seek treatment. People are ill. They must stay at home in quarantine for a total of 14 days.
Day by day, this thing changes, right? What we understand about it. I mean, there's still information coming out of China and Italy that we are learning from. So, like from a medical point of view, I mean, when you're in a changing situation, how do we know how to adapt? How can we anticipate moves to make if we don't really know all that we should know about this disease? I
think we have certain basic information which is of great importance. We know that the disease is spread through the respiratory route. We know we don't have an effective treatment other than supportive care for the most very sick people who have to go to the hospital. So by practicing social distancing and basically staying at home and limiting your contacts, you're less likely to have the disease, and if you suffer an acute illness, it's not likely you're going to get testing anytime soon, so you have to isolate yourself. Preferably, if you have a housing situation that's better than they have in New York City, where you have a private home, it's best to have your own bathroom and to be separated from the other people in your house. That's almost impossible in New York City because those kind of houses are available only for the very affluent or the people who live out in Queens and other places and have several bedrooms and several bathrooms to isolate people who are ill. So we do have something that we can do, and keeping busy mentally and emotionally, using all the social media tools, reaching out to your loved ones, to friends and families. This would be a good time to get in touch with people you haven't reached out to in years, but you're now thinking of, and having that emotional support is going to be very important. Getting through the next couple of weeks, and hopefully the next month or two, I don't imagine is going to last longer than that in any one location.
How long do you think it'll last?
Well, a maximum would be a month.
Really? That's kind of encouraging, because you hear some of these claims that this can go on intensely for months.
It will, but in different locations.
Okay.
We'll have hotspots flaring up. Because the disease hit the west and east coasts as a result of people flying in with the illness. Those are the areas that are most heavily hit. as it spreads into the heartland of the country, where unfortunately social distancing and isolation are not being promoted as perhaps they should, we will see over the next month or two all parts of the country likely involved with perhaps 40 to 70% of the American population becoming ill during the first wave.
Do you think that New York State has done enough to lock down and tamper this wave?
I think New York State and New York City are to be commended for all the efforts that they're making. In other cities, they're not facing the same challenges in New York State as New York City. So I think New York is a pretty good example of doing about everything a city and a state can do. Yeah. Whether it's enough we'll know in the next 3 weeks. The number of cases are increasing rapidly, not necessarily because of rapid spread at this time, but because we're picking up cases that have already occurred in the population.
What exactly is COVID-19, and is it related to SARS?
Yes, it is. COVID-19, SARS, and MERS are all what they call novel or new coronaviruses. Viruses are basically parasites. They are at the border between living and non-living tissues. Basically, what a virus is simply a piece of genetic material. In the corona case, it's RNA, which is, if you remember from your high school biology, ribonucleic acid. It's basically a genetic material that's wrapped in a protein shell. It cannot move around by itself, and it can only make copies of itself once it invades a cell. So it's doubtful whether you can even call a virus a living particle. It takes control of the cell's reproductive machinery by invading the nucleus, and then by integrating its genetic material into the nucleus of the cell, it orders the cell to make copies of itself, which then kill the cell and break out by hundreds and the thousands. The body's response to this type of attack is usually in terms of developing antibodies against the causing agent, this shell of protein, or by using cellular immunity to attack the cells and to clean up the cells that have already been injured. So in the case of coronaviruses, and this is something that's surprising, the coronaviruses, 4 of them commonly cause what we refer to as the common cold. What is so terrible about the coronaviruses in this case is that they came from animals. We don't have any immunity, and therefore we are incredibly susceptible to not only being injured by the cells, by this viral infection, but also transmitting it to others.
So it's not necessarily as a entity, as a virus. It's not stronger or more powerful. It's just it has a key into our system because we just don't have a defense for it. It's not. Is it? If you're to compare the different viruses, is it any more evolved than any other?
Well, in terms of evolution, viral particles, illnesses, they evolve, they mutate on a regular basis. This is why the influenza virus requires a new vaccine every year. There's what's called genetic drift or mutation. So that scientists every year when they prepare vaccines for influenza, they have to make their best guess as to what the virus is going to look like when it comes. And usually they start in Asia and they spread during the winter months across the entire planet. What's tragically particular about these viruses is that they can cause acute respiratory distress syndrome, ARDS, severe forms of pneumonia, which in the case of the first SARS epidemic, the coronavirus number 1, which started in 2003 and 2004, spread. That virus had a lethality rate of 10%. People who got it were so terribly sick that it was easy to identify those cases and to isolate and quarantine people who had been exposed.
I see.
Working with the Middle Eastern acute respiratory distress syndrome coronavirus, the MERS virus, that was so lethal that perhaps 40% of the people died when they got it. So if you got that virus, you were very sick. It was easy to identify you. What's dangerous about the current coronavirus, too, or the COVID-19 illness that it causes, is that there are large numbers of people who are asymptomatic, who spread the disease without even knowing they've been sick, and they can spread it to people who are more sensitive to it for one reason or other and can get sick and die from it. So, in a sense, the worldwide spread of this illness is greater than the previous coronavirus epidemics, because it's lethal enough to kill hundreds of thousands or millions of people in a country like the United States, but not so lethal that you could easily identify the cases, and so it rapidly spreads the population. And as we're seeing in Italy, it can spread so rapidly that their healthcare system is overwhelmed. Right. And people are being denied the benefit of intensive care, and even hospitals are turning away people because they don't even have enough oxygen to give to people, and they're dying at home, and tragically not getting any care.
Was Italy's medical system infrastructure really poor, or was their response time poor?
Well, they have actually a more developed public health system than the United States in terms of hospital care. They have a greater ratio of doctors to the general population. But what happened with Italy, especially northern Italy, was that tourism established many, many cases early, and the attempts at lockdown and at case identification were not, and also social isolation, were not carried out till the disease had already spread. It's like the old saying, it's closing the barn door after the cow has left. The lockdown procedures happen too late. They're most effective if applied early, and you have sufficient testing, which the Italians did not have, and we have even less sufficient testing. The examples of Corona-19 control that are outstanding are in countries like South Korea, which had the first number of cases at the same time that we did. Were able to rapidly test tens of, and then hundreds of thousands, and then millions of people, and were able to quickly identify those hotspots. And by having social distancing and other forms of quarantine and isolation, they got under control. We're not going to be able to do that in New York, and probably not in other parts of the country as well. But we're hoping that the actions, at least in California and in Washington State, will be successful. We just don't know. It's too early to tell.
Now, why have some of these diseases come out of China? Do you have any idea why?
Well, I have an idea. There are animal reservoirs of coronaviruses, which, and the first corona epidemic of acute respiratory distress that was caused back in 2003, 2002, 2004, came out of a food market, what they call a wet market, where live animals are being sold in southern China. And that coronavirus came from an animal that was in a wet market, a wild animal perhaps, and spread rapidly. In terms of the current epidemic, the virus that's attacking us now was originally from bats. It then jumped species to perhaps one of the animals that were being kept in the wet markets, which are basically live wild animals being sold in China. And in the city of Wuhan, where they have these quite unfortunate places where wild animals are captured and then killed for food. They're stored under very unsanitary conditions, one cage on top of the other. Mm-hmm. And so the animals can basically infect one another, and when a proper host is inoculated and then becomes ill, it can jump again into humans. So we think that it came originally from bats and then to other animals that were then subsequently sold in the market where the initial outbreak occurred.
So is some version of coronavirus here to stay then?
Well, we don't really know the answer to that. In the SARS epidemic, we were able to isolate it and basically eliminate the cases. Now that we have worldwide spread, it seems likely that some form of coronavirus will be with us for some time. Mm-hmm. However, with the development of vaccines and proper treatment, we can limit the death and injuries by the virus. So we don't really know whether this virus will mutate. It's hoped that it will mutate to a less virulent or lethal form. We also hope that it'll decrease in the summer, but we're seeing many cases being spread in Australia, which is having their summer right now. So that's not likely to have a significant impact in stopping the disease, although it might slow it down, giving us time to develop better treatment and also a vaccine.
Right. Now, something like mad cow disease, right, that came out of Great Britain. And, we don't call it the British disease, whereas with the coronavirus, we've heard it referred to as the Chinese disease or China disease. Is that a fair descriptive, or should we really be avoiding labeling like that?
I think we should avoid this designation. World Health Organization has given disease a name, COVID-19, and that's the one we should use. In the past, epidemics have been used to label one ethnic group or another, and unfortunately, when you do that sort of thing, it incites hate crimes and other. It's better to look forward and not focus on where this particular virus came from, but to use the World Health Organization designation.
To keep it scientific.
To keep it scientific, and also not to incite people to carry out acts of hate crimes against Asian people all over the world.
Right. Well, I think because of what we're going through in a time of crisis, all I have to say is that we really need to think big and rise above any sort of this divisiveness. Even if I don't care where you stand on any issue, I just really want all of us to just try to not pick fights, try to lift each other up and really unify, because we need that now more than ever. So I just feel like we need to lead with love and compassion and communicate whatever you need to communicate using that as your guide point. Now, the one question I do want to ask you before we go is, I think it's an absolutely fair question because it has concerned me as well, and the president has brought this up, and it's what happens if this goes too long? Is the collateral damage of a crashed economy, are there more ill side effects, deaths, ruined families because of the economic crash versus the impact of the disease itself?
If the disease is unchecked, it will lead to the death of 1 million people in this country, 20 times what we usually see with influenza. How you balance those deaths with the destruction done by a major recession is a very hard calculus to make. Unfortunately, we may have to face the possibility that all the social distancing methods and quarantines that are being put in effect may not be sufficient. So the worst possible world would be our economy ruined and the disease basically overwhelms the healthcare system, and hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people will be affected, and a large number will die unnecessarily because the hospitals are overwhelmed. So we live in we're carrying out an experiment on what measures might work. We'll have a better answer in the next few weeks to come, and the calculus that you're referring to will be able to be made more effectively at that time.
Well, I certainly hope so, yeah. Do you think, last question real quick, based on what you know right now, is a hard lockdown across the nation the best way to deal with this?
The best way to deal with this is to have pain up front, a hard lockdown immediately, because that has the most chance of controlling the virus. And that's what social distancing and other methods were used, where there are examples like in Hong Kong and Singapore, where using those methods, they were able to identify cases and eliminate them. The pain was intense, but it was short-lived. The longer we wait for the disease to spread before we take action, the less likely those actions are going to be effective, and the economic pain and suffering will have been for naught.
Right. Well, this is not an easy time for any of us individually, and it's certainly not easy for our leaders too, because like you said, it's a calculus. It's very complicated. So I wish you all the best in health and wellness. Do you have any last thoughts before we let you go?
Well, I would say that I happen to be a person who prefers not to eat meat, and I think that once this blows over, I think people should pay attention to what the very cruel conditions that wild animals were subjected to in the past in China, and to make sure that they do not open those kind of wet markets where wild animals are stored under horrific conditions that allowed the initial SARS epidemic in 2003 and now this one in 2019 to occur. So once we get over this, we should all encourage the Chinese not to resume the wet markets where wild animals are being captured and basically stockpiled for food.
All right. Well, let's keep in touch, Dr. Burkes, and I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. Okay, we're going to go to our first break, and on the other side, Heidi Hollis and Maureen Seaberg. And yeah, we're going to be talking empaths and machines, and it might not be exactly what you think, but I promise you, it will be intriguing. And again, I just want to say to everybody out there that myself and everyone at KGRA, we really care about you. We care about people in our own lives and our family. So just please be thoughtful and mindful of each other, and let's get through this together. This is Alan B. Smith for Paranormal Now on KGRA. We will be right back.
Paranormal Now. Find the podcast on iTunes, iHeart, and Spotify. KGRARadio.com.
Welcome back to Paranormal Now. This is your grateful host, Alan B. Smith on KGRA Radio. My guests, beginning now until the end of this show, are Heidi Hollis and Maureen Seaberg. We'll be discussing a really intriguing topic, and I think it's so sort of new to the field of the paranormal. I don't hear a lot of people talking about this, which makes it really exciting for me. Now, we'll be talking about machine empaths. What does that mean? We'll get that answer questioned. Later, when you have questions for Heidi and Maureen, you can call the Paranormal Radio app line. That's 85-KGRA live, 855-472-5483. We'll open that up in the last half hour of the show tonight, and you can post your questions. Just stand by. So here's the thing. So I'll tell you what we're talking about tonight. Humans are connecting with technology, and technology is reaching back. Maureen Seaberg, an expert in synesthesia, has come across 5 machine empaths, with Heidi Hollis being one of them. Maureen Seaberg has written for the New York Times, National Geographic, Vogue, and many other venues. She is an expert blogger on the sensory for Psychology Today and is herself a neurological outlier as both a poly-synesthete and genetic tetrachromat. I knew I was going to mess that up. Possessing a 4th class for color vision in her eyes, Heidi Hollis has authored 8 books and has written for Reform Magazine UK, UFO Magazine UK US, Weird Magazine, Pure Inspiration Magazine, and others. She has been featured on various television and radio shows worldwide and is the foremost expert on 2 phenomena she named and defined: shadow people and hat man. She's also a comic strip artist, radio talk show host, and was practicing occupational therapist. That's a last-minute edit right there. You can find out more about Maureen at Twitter at tetrachromatics and Heidi Hollis at #1HeidiHollis. Welcome both.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Alan. It's great to be back.
Yeah, so I was kind of laughing as this is happening, right? Because we had to cancel last week's show because we had technical issues. And then you guys come on, and then now we have reverb. So I'm just wondering, considering what we're talking about tonight, is this uncommon?
Not when Heidi's around. Thank you for having me on. I think Heidi is a special case. The other 4 machine empaths I have come across are young millennial women who get impressions from machines. So it's more than just naming your car per se or relating to your phone or your technology. These are people who, one woman is an engineer, and when she programs robotic arms, she feels the movements of the robotic arms in her own arms. But Heidi takes it to another level. I think Heidi is able to push back at technology, and it's something like the poly effect, which many of your listeners will be familiar with, but just where some people, some special people, when they are around technology, it goes a little nuts. Am I right, Heidi?
Oh, just a bit, and or get it to work better than it should have, or fix itself. Yeah,
it's negative.
Well, okay, so just to clear the air right off the bat, I was speaking to somebody about tonight's show, and I was asked about robotic sex toys, right?
Oh my goodness!
Is that
right there, Alan?
Really?
Let's
is that
really, Alan? Really?
I'm clearing the air. So, is that a thing related to what you're talking about tonight?
You know, I never really thought about it, but I bet machine empaths would be early adopters of such things.
Interesting. Wait, so
I'm not talking about Heidi. I'm just talking about people out there.
Okay. Heidi, what do you have to say about that?
really stunned. I am really stunned, Alan. My goodness.
Well, Heidi's stunned because her and I have talked off the air many a time. I've probably never said anything along these lines in our conversations. So.
No, never. And I know your wife is within reach. I hope she smacks you a little bit for that one. So just like right off the bat. Okay. Yeah, that's different. It's never crossed my mind either. So, yeah, I couldn't imagine. And like Maureen said, the folks that she's come across, they're all women. So more than likely we have not ventured in that direction.
I can't tell yet. It's so early in my journey of documenting such folks. But I have only come across one young man in India who says he experiences this. And I'm not sure if it's more common in women, or as is the case in a lot of your fascinating topics, Alan, women tend to be more open about talking about such things.
I think
it remains to be seen,
Yes, I think you're right in general. I think a little bit of that is changing now.
I hope so. Present company accepted, of course.
Well, yeah, thank you. I mean, so many guests that have been on the show that speak in terms of any topic that's about vulnerability, spirituality. I would say the majority are probably women. Now, what is this exactly? What is a synesthete?
Okay, a synesthete is a person, one of 4% of people in the world, who has bonus sensory experiences. So, for example, if I'm reading a newspaper, say page 1 of the New York Times, and I see the numeral 5, I know that it is black on a white background, but I will also get the color blue, a navy blue, around it. Huh. So I'm seeing what you're seeing. Synesthetes are very grounded in reality. It's not like an acid trip in that you don't lose your grip. But there's a bonus layer on top of it.
Is it akin to auras?
That you're so intuitive. They are just now saying that they believe aura seeing is one of the almost 100 forms, more than 80 forms of synesthesia now.
Okay, so it is odd though, right? The idea that you can sort of feel and connect, I guess psychically, I don't know if that's the right term, with the machine. So what does that mean? Is it alive or?
Heidi, you have the experience. While I have synesthesia, I do not have this. So Heidi is the expert.
It's a strange thing. It's like, you feel that your car has a personality to it, or you're addressing it as such, whether it really does or not. But for me, it seems to vibe at a certain level that I have I felt that I needed to reach out to different inanimate objects because they weren't always working well for me. And I just kind of give the example of, I noticed that when I was around computers and whatnot, things were acting haywire. And I was lucky that my father was a computer engineer and could repair all the things that I was frying and destroying without trying. I was trying to get through college, and it was so frustrating. And I'm like, okay, I really need to be able to get things done. I'm intruding upon these things to an extent where they don't feel comfortable, so they're not going to work for me. And so I'm like, okay, kind of like when a dog can sense fear, and you let it sniff your hand before you go to pet it. That's what I started to do. So I started to, but it's something that I did naturally before. When I played sports, when I'd go to hit a volleyball, I'm like, do you want to go? I would literally ask it, sometimes out loud. Do you want to go? Do you want to hit your target? And it was strange. It was almost like I don't know, kind of an understanding, even, if you will, like sure, type of thing. Like, and I could feel if it wasn't going to happen, if it wasn't going to work, it was I didn't think of it as being a strange thing. I knew it wasn't something that others did much of, but I just felt like it was something that I needed to do. And we are a part of this planet. We are the same makeup of objects on this planet, because if we're pulling different elements together to create something, and we're also able to participate in evolving from this planet, I can't help but to think that we have a lot more in common with these things than not. So I kind of meet them at that point, I guess.
Maureen, as a synesthete, there's still a relation between that and Heidi, a machine empath, correct?
Yeah, I'm so glad. I should explain this better. So 4% of people in the world are synesthetes. 1.6% of people in the world, fewer, are type of synesthete known as a mirror touch synesthete. So these are the highly empathic people. It has nothing to do with color. It has to do with our mirror neurons. So mirror neurons are present in all people. The great neuroscientist V.S. Ramachandran calls them Gandhi neurons and says they are the very basis of our civilization. And I'll explain. They were only discovered in 2009 by researchers in Italy studying macaque monkeys. And they came to find out while viewing monkeys inside of scanning machines that a monkey doing a task, a little task it was able to do in the machine, whatever that was, would have the same area of the brain light up as it would if it were witnessing another monkey doing the task. So this suggests a vast network among beings, right? My brain would light up whether I were crocheting a hat or Heidi, or I were watching Heidi do so. So everyone has these neurons, but mirror touch synesthetes seem to have more of an experience with them. And people like us can literally feel another person's pain or pleasure. So the bigger group is synesthetes. Whittling it down, among them you have mirror touch empathic synesthetes. And then within that small group is the very small group we're talking about tonight. People who are so very empathic that their feelings extend to the inanimate.
Right. And so what is that exactly? Because now let's say you take it from like a Buddhist point of view, that there or any number of philosophical views that there is a life force that permeates all things. So is that all it is? Is it sort of just like a concentration of energy, or is there something more dynamic happening?
Of course, this is only a theory because I am not a neuroscientist, nor has this been studied yet. I am the person who coined this phenomenon after discovering a few cases as a journalist, so let me just say that up front. But if I had to theorize, I would say it could be chi or prana, the life force. It could also be, because I am of the mind that consciousness permeates everything, I am what is called a panpsychist. So I don't believe your brain has to, or any system has to achieve enough complexity for the lights to go on, right? And consciousness to exist. I am of the school that consciousness is everywhere. So I would think we are having some sort of conscious awareness of these systems. And that's my theory as to what's going on. But I would love to see more scientific research into this.
For everybody listening, if you want to find the article that Maureen had written, including a Q&A with Heidi, you can go to psychologytoday.com/us/experts/Maureen-Seaberg, and you'll find it there. I'll put a link in the chat room as well. How on earth are you able to publish as a journalist such a topic on Psychology Today?
Well, I'm very fortunate in that my editors are very receptive, and they vet things. I don't get away with everything there. But these were very compelling interviews I did with these 4 young women over a couple-year period. Mm-hmm. And, synesthesia is edgy and odd enough that I think perhaps I get a little bit more room to explore. And I'm very grateful for that.
I have to say, she interviewed me for weeks. I had no idea where things were going, and it was fascinating to me that her methodical process to really think things through, because I'm like, I don't think I see colors when I see numbers. I'm like, maybe I don't have this. But she had asked some other questions, and she took her time, and I'm like, okay, so there was so much. I learned so much, and I still am learning from her, and so many different aspects of this that really connects us as human beings, as she was saying, because I don't see, honestly, how people go about their days without feeling their neighbor or feeling something that they see on television, like really gut-wrenching to the point of you want to jump out of your seat to help, because it's just that overpowering. And something that Maureen didn't touch base on, she is so sensitive herself. I mean, I love the story about those high schoolers, Maureen, that you spoke to.
Thank you. So I am a mirror touch synesthete. And so I have synesthesia, the colors and sensations that way. And then I have a real awareness of my mirror touch neurons. And I was invited to speak on synesthesia at a New York City public high school 2 years ago. And wouldn't you know, when I got to the mirror touch synesthesia part and started to explain that some people can feel other people's pain and pleasure, the hands started going up in the classroom, asked me where they hurt. And I thought, yikes, because it was such a busy classroom. There were 2 classes packed into it, all honors kids, a whole bunch of teachers and administrators. And if you're a mirror touch synesthete like me and Heidi, there's a lot of noise associated with that, even if they were sitting in silence. So there's some kind of visceral hit, energetically, emotionally, physically, that we get. And I thought, my goodness, I know I can do this. I know I do it every day of my life, but can I do it on the spot and in such a busy room? Mm-hmm. And so 6 different kids in a row with little problems here and there asked me, and I got it. I got every one of them right. And the teacher was crying at the end of the class. So it was a real watershed day for me, because this is kind of this, though I write about it, my own experience has been only kind of an internal monologue, right? If I see a World War II vet with a cane or something, I'm feeling his aches and I'm hoping for him. It's hard to look away, but I'm not engaging with him. And this classroom experience just brought it all out into the open. And the kids were kind enough to write testimonials, and the teacher wrote a testimonial, and it was a really special day for all of us.
many people, including myself, have reported being able to. It hasn't happened to me in a while actually. But when you're in a room with an electronic, like a TV or something, you can hear like a slight kind of electric buzzing, and other people can't hear it. Is that related to anything we're talking about tonight, or do you think that's just some physiological hearing thing?
I would be willing to think it could, because you're experiencing something, a bonus something, that the average person is not. So there's some kind of pathway open in you that's not average. That would be my theory. It would be wonderful to test that somehow.
So I can join your club.
Well, it isn't I think an example of synesthesia too. It's like when you hear music and you get goosebumps. I mean, there's no connection to your ears and goosebumps, but we associate it somehow. Am I correct? That's part of it too.
Yeah. Excuse me. Well, I think the vast majority of people get goosebumps, but there's something called ASMR where people it's a more vivid experience, and there a lot of synesthetes report this. So it's like goosebumps on steroids, sort of thing, and. It's really interesting that we should find ourselves on such an open-minded forum with your paranormal subject matter, because synesthetes also test really well psychically. And there's a researcher she's just fabulous, Dr. Christine Simmons Moore. She trained at the Rhine Institute in North Carolina, no less. And she has done studies on psychic phenomena and peak experiences and synesthetes. I was part of one of the studies. It was a blind study, so I didn't know what exactly she was looking for until it was all over. But we all test much higher than average in psychic ability.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I just had, I think, a really brilliant question from KGRA's own Carol Carl, and it is that noise that I described. Could that be picking up a sort of general anxiety from a machine, like their version of a radar or something?
Ooh, I think it could be. I have a very open mind about this, because if it's happening to someone as sensitive as you, mm-hmm. and not to other people, then we need to explore what that is. And do you have an emotional response to it when you hear it?
Nope. Mm-mm.
No.
It's just kind of there.
I wonder. I mean, these are all really brilliant questions. And I'm supposed to be a science journalist. I am. Mm-hmm. But, we science journalists have a lot to learn from the alternative community like yourselves, because science, in my mind, is you just search for answers no matter where it leads you.
Right.
And there's a real wall around traditional science still, in my opinion. What is acceptable to explore and what is not. And I think that was a great question it's Carol, right? That's a really interesting question.
Now, we all are familiar with Dr. Alan Grant from Jurassic Park, the original. Mm-hmm. And do you remember when he would touch a computer, it would kind of flicker?
That's Heidi. That's Heidi.
Yes. So everyone keep that in mind, because I have some questions for Heidi. Her childhood is very interesting, and it connects to everything that we're speaking about here tonight. And who knows? I mean, maybe you are also a machine empath. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. So go to the KGRA chat room. Let us know what you think. Ask your questions. And, of course, you can call in the last half hour for the Paranormal Radio app line. That's 85KGRA live. So hang in there. This is Alan B. Smith for Paranormal Now. We will be right back.
This is Paranormal Now. Find the podcast on iTunes, iHeart, and Spotify. KGRARadio.com.
My heart aches from this change, but I can't live life making the same mistakes, 'cause I know that's not right. And though I never meant to cause this pain, but I know what I have to do, because sometimes people get attached when it's not meant to be, and stay hurt so that nothing will change. And I know that's not right.
Welcome back to Paranormal Now. This is Alan Smith, your grateful host once again for the final hour of tonight's very fascinating conversation. Taking us out of the break was January Waits by Septembrio. If you're not familiar with Septembrio, their website is septembrio.com. You can go and check those guys out, download their music. They donate their songs so that we can use them here on the program every week. And I just really appreciate not only their good spirits, but their awesome music as well. So Heidi and Maureen, before we continue on with this conversation, Maureen, I know that you wanted to say a few things in light of the coronavirus pandemic we're in right now.
Yes, I live in New York City. I'm a native New Yorker, and I would just like to thank all the doctors, all the nurses, the first responders, grocery workers, plumbers, sanitation. This city is under siege right now, and these people somehow walk out the door every morning, every night, and it's really bad here right now, and I'm just very grateful, and I'd like to say thank you to them.
Right.
And to
Amen.
everyone
That's
around
awesome.
the world doing that.
Yeah, it's rough. And I've just moved here from Chicago not too long ago, and being an occupational therapist all over the city, and some of the people that I personally know and worked with, they're really they're frightened, but you know, like you said, they're getting up every day. They're going out and they're doing what they can to prevent people from getting worse with this virus when they come in the doors. You know, so it's, you know, kudos to them. And as of a few weeks ago, I'm not practicing right now as a therapist, but will hopefully join the ranks again to help people out if needed. So yeah, it's rough out there. So prayers to everybody going through
Yes,
it.
very much so. Prayers.
I mean, that's what makes it so difficult about this is, you know, this isn't a physical destruction. This is something much more, I would say, insidious, because it's not easy to go out and volunteer necessarily, because every time you do, you have to take all of these precautions to protect yourself and protect others. And you just don't know. It's an invisible thing. You don't know.
Yeah. And they need equipment. And I call on our president, our federal government, our state governments to give these heroes and heroines what they need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, how can you volunteer your time to help if you don't have the equipment to protect you and others around you?
Yeah.
Right. And you could be unwittingly spreading it if you didn't have such equipment too. So
Right.
it's just, Yeah, and if I
That's
may
scary.
say a word, I don't belong to a political party, but this is my observation as a journalist. We have to be really concerned about our constitutional rights at the same time, because there are, there's the enemy of the virus and there's the enemy of creeping fascism. And I urge everyone to reach out to your representatives and tell them we need to keep our Constitution in place.
As we roll out measures.
Because what are we fighting for if not, right?
Exactly.
Right.
I think those are good words of wisdom to heed. From what I can tell, Maureen, right now, I don't think we've really crossed any Rubicon. But what about yourself? Do you think we've dipped our toes in that direction?
I would like to see this flattening of the curve that goes on and people returning to work as they have in China, if that can be believed.
Yeah.
But honestly, New York is not in that position. We have yet to peak. They say our peak will be in 14 to 21 days. And the cases are growing exponentially right now. So,
but do you think the state or government has crossed any lines yet towards a more, fascist approach at all? Because I personally,
there was a big report in Newsweek just a couple of days ago about continuity of government measures. Apparently, a plan was put in place 30 days ago to potentially usurp a lot of our rights in the name of protecting us. And I think as a New Yorker who lived through 9/11 and lost people, I think, we don't get those rights back when we give them over in a state of fear. So I don't think it's impossible to fight the virus and keep our way of life at the same time.
Well, I hope that we at least come out on the other side of it a little more evolved. Is that a possibility?
I hope so.
Oh,
I mean, this is a time of reflection for everyone. Wouldn't you say, Heidi?
Oh, gosh. Yes, honestly. I think this is a time that, people need to be proud of their faith and their roots and their faith, because I find it seems to be really popular to say someone is spiritual versus just claiming to be Christian. And, if that's where you stand, now's the time, because we're facing a really evil force out there. This is evil. And I've been talking about how I'm certain that things like shadow people and the Hat Man and other demonic forces are going to up the ante and their presence and take advantage of people getting paranoid, depressed, ill, or near death. So this is a time for people to look within, look towards their souls, and get the faith of a mustard seed. It's a time to move the mountains, because when you have no doubts in your faith, anything is possible.
Well, like I was saying to Dr. Burkes in the first half hour, there are people who are doing the right thing. And I really appreciate their thoughtfulness and mindfulness here in the city, people spacing themselves from each other, wearing masks, not going out in good crowded spaces. But then there are those that don't listen at all. Like this last Saturday, Cuomo shared a picture of Union Square Farmers Market, and it was packed with people like sardines. And wow. I thought, this is just so wrong. I really thought de Blasio should just shut the thing down just to prevent that. But I thought, my goodness, people don't do that. Obviously, we have to do shopping. But most supermarkets that you go to now, it's not packed with people. You can go in, you can keep your distance to a good degree. When I saw that picture from Saturday, man, that really kind of upset me.
Yeah.
But that's horrible.
I am encouraged by people's behavior overall. And I have to say, I don't, maybe it's wrong for me to say that I'm surprised. I think it is wrong for me to say I'm surprised, but I'm happy to say that there's not been any rioting or, outbreaks of that sort. do you think that that's something, and I know you both are both intuitive people, do you think that that's something that we could see, or do you think we might actually get by without having to deal with that?
I always say that desperate people would do desperate things. It's hard when you've got a family to feed and you see somebody going past that has exactly what you need to keep your family fed. So it's I think it could easily get to that point of desperation. I just spoke to a friend yesterday who's up in Canada and asked, do you guys have food there? Because we don't have food. I said, what? Oh my God. It's at that point now where they're days away from having nothing to eat. So it's getting real. It's getting scary. And she happens to have a autistic son who will only eat 6 things, and they are running low on that. So what do you do?
Yeah.
Oh, exactly.
It's funny. The moment you asked the question, I thought food in my head. And I agree 100% with Heidi. There would be a lot of Jean Valjeans from Les Miserables in a short amount of time stealing bread crusts if the food ran out. So I think having a steady food supply, a steady essential product supply is really going to be the key to keeping the peace here. Yeah.
We have to collectively help each other. Like Ray Hobbs is saying, wherever a place needs the help most, the other place in the U.S., wherever that may be, where they're not stressed, they need to send food. They need to send whatever they can, assistance to help that place. And I guess we just sort of have to, what's that? Gopher, the moles. What's that game you play where you have to keep hitting it on the head as it pops?
Oh, whack-a-mole.
It's kind of. Hopefully it's not that like that, but the idea is.
Yeah, but that's a powerful image.
Yeah,
true.
Exactly.
As the problem arises, get right in there.
Yeah, we have to do it collectively.
Truly.
Well, so let's leave it there, and we'll get back to tonight's topic. And so, Heidi, do you think you were born a machine empath, or, and if you could tell us about this, was it your childhood that formed you?
Oh, goodness. Well, it's strange to say, but it's like I know that I have some rather unique experiences that lead me to think that quite potentially I was born this way. So I always kind of looked at the world a little bit different. I even have early memories of asking my parents the strangest things, like, where does fat go when you lose it? This takes forever. It takes forever to get somewhere. Why do we have to put one foot in front of the other? Why can't we just fly? Just an odd perspective on things, I guess. I think I was kind of born to look at the world a little bit differently than most. But I find that people who are artsy, that we do tend to look between the lines. We do tend to pay attention to things going on around us, because we are looking for the art in the world that we could replicate or duplicate or create on our own. So, and we happen to trip up and fall into paranormal instances and spotting things that a lot of people don't. So, I think it's something that it's just kind of in me to be along those lines of being a little different.
Well, Einstein, for instance, he had a bigger part of his brain that was more developed, and I guess, like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Did he exercise his brain and that grew, or was he born that way? I guess that's the same sort of thing with yourself. I mean, what was happening in your brain, that made you the way?
What's strange, I did have, from the age of 2, I had severe seizures that they didn't think I would live past the age of 10. Mm-hmm. So there was something going on there that was a bit out of the ordinary, and it was deadly. So, and I had a lot of experiences visiting this heaven-like place, this crystal city. And it's not always from having had seizures. I just would have these memories of this place and come up with new ones all the time. And I just talked about it rather casually. So it was...
Pardon me.
I don't know, just things that seem to always be a part of my life as far back as I can recall. Something I wanted to tell you about, something that Maureen had shared in regards to those high schoolers. Mm-hmm. And what was it, Maureen, that you'd said that the teacher, you said, well, but what good is this to be able to feel the pain of others if I can't do anything about it? And
it begs the question of, could people aware of other people's pain become healers?
Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you something. This is true. This is just a couple of days ago. So I had a couple of days of having a sore throat, and all of a sudden I did a radio show and I got off the air, and I mean, I'm somebody that runs really low. I have like 97.7 body temperature. Usually I'm really low on. I'm like, God, I feel warm. Let me take my temperature. 99 degrees. Now, when I hit 99 degrees, I am sick. And I'm like, uh-oh. With this virus going around, I'm like, I hope to God I don't have anything going on at this time, so I don't question what's happening. And I just happened to send Maureen a message like, I have this scratchy throat, and oh my gosh, I have this temperature. And she goes, what did you text on there? She's like, give me a minute, let me pray for you. And I'm like, friends say that. That's sweet. That's kind. I'm like, okay. A few minutes later, I feel a cool breeze on the back of my neck. And I'm like, oh, that's odd, And I started to feel cooler. I'm like, this just couldn't have happened. So 5 minutes after I had sent this to her, I checked my temperature and it's dropped. 10 minutes later, I am at 97.3, like below my usual. And I text her back. I said, did you just pray for me? She's like, yeah. I was like, okay, you can back off now. I'm getting cold. I mean, I couldn't believe it. I was like, made me an absolute believer. Like, she really intended that. And it worked in that. I did not get feverish since. I'm fine.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm very grateful to you for sharing that.
Oh, it's mind-blowing.
I think I need to learn. And is it possible? I imagine it is. And it would be wonderful. Excuse me. Pardon me. It would be wonderful if people who are born into mirror touch synesthesia were educated differently, right? And had these tools at their disposal. Yeah. And I am so untrained, in anything like that. Perhaps I should study Reiki or something like that.
Well, I have
my goodness.
I have a theory, and I don't know how scientific it is. It's probably not very scientific. But I think that when someone either intentionally prays or does not pray, or puts out an intention, whatever phrase you want to use, I think it may only work when it comes from the subconscious or somewhere much deeper inside, which is to say, just because you decide to pray, that doesn't mean there's any effect. Because obviously, people have been praying for lots of things in large numbers, and things don't change. And so I don't think just saying I'm going to pray necessarily.
But she feels it.
But
she felt my temperature, my fever. Yeah,
and,
at the
and
same
that distinguishes it from just go getting on your knees and praying. It's like that some other machination that's much deeper and harder to feel. I also use to explain why I can't tap into the force and move things with my mind. Because maybe we could, right? Maybe we could do those amazing things. Just can't get whatever that level is by just deciding to do it.
Gotcha. And some
lingering cough.
Something that's important to know too. I'd mentioned about the times that we're in right now, and there being this heavy presence that I know it's coming with this wave of illness and depression of people with this virus. But have I've been in touch with Maureen ever since she's interviewed me for weeks, so that we got to be friends over the course. I'm absolutely just grateful to have such a cool friend. And
Me too.
And I've shared some of the odd things that have absolutely increased since. I don't know. I thought at first, am I just being more aware of things going on around me? But this creeping suspicion of something else taking place has definitely been very prominent as of late. I mean, electronics going haywire is one thing, but it's been at a different level, to a point of absolute poltergeist activity. Mm-hmm. And I've come to the conclusion that, somebody told me, it's like, oh, probably you're becoming telekinetic. I'm like, I don't think so. I think it's something else. And I had something happen, was it about a week ago or so, that let me know this was a protective force around us. I mean, when you think about it, something so evil as this virus going on and people getting affected in such horrific ways, of course the opposing force would know. And of course they would show up for it. And I think, and I'm pretty certain, that angelic forces are also showing up around us. So I'm telling people to pay attention to, things moving on their own that seems to be a little bit protective, or letting you know that there's something else there that was never there before. But it's not scary. It's not to intimidate or anything like that. It's just to say, hey, we're here, and to feed into that through like prayer, because evil can't read your mind, but the good side can. So you don't want to speak this out loud, so people are not making themselves vulnerable to have these things, negative things, mimic the good. So, but when you're talking about, move things with your mind, I'm like, things are starting to move around, and it's happened to friends and family members of mine, and they kept blaming me. And I'm like, hold on. This is really going to a whole other level. I think that, there's a presence going on. And what happened about a week ago, I was stepping over my shoe. I had my hands full, and I was trying to clear it, but I didn't. And because it moved out of the way. It moved out of the way on its own. I mean, I'm having the electronic stuff going on and, other things going on, but this thing moved out of the way, and I'm like, that was protective. I don't have poltergeist things going on around me. And I think it's important to put that out there, that, people should, pay attention to what's going on around them, and that we can feed into the positive and help to defeat this.
All right, so we're going to open up the listener lines to call in and ask your questions of Maureen Seaberg. If you're just tuning in, she is a neurological outlier, poly-synesthete, and genetic tetrachromat. And Heidi is a machine empath, and so much more. So if you have questions, just call in. We'll listen for your cue. We'll pull you on and ask away, just as long as you are respectful. And that number is 855-472-5483, 855-472-5483 for the Paranormal Radio app line. Is there... Do you think, has there always been people like yourselves pre-machine age?
Yes, and I'll tell you why. One of my mentors is an MIT-affiliated anthropologist, Dr. William Bushell, and I ran this all past him, and he said, even blacksmiths in the Middle Ages talked about a relationship with the metals and the tools. And it was almost this alchemy that went on in creating things. So I would imagine since time immemorial, people have related to objects outside of themselves. But now, of course, many of our objects are electronic.
Well, I mean, people have always related, I think, to objects and talismans and the sort, right?
Yeah.
How much of that do you think is just sort of projecting a meaning onto something and actually feeling something that's there outside of your own imagination.
Yeah, it may come down to this panpsychism. If everything is indeed conscious, there could be some sort of network among objects and beings.
Do you think certain type of people could actually be sort of feeding the consciousness or whatever that is, that energy around computers and machines or objects, almost like we're not projecting our own consciousness, but our own force into it and sort of sprouting a new something?
I think that's entirely possible. I mean, I've been witness to Heidi's electronic difficulties in texts, and I've seen videos of her TV just going to snow when she's in the room, and some people, I think brain scans would prove this. The brain waves of a Tibetan virtuoso monk are very different than my own. So it's quite possible that there are people among us who have superpowers this way.
Yeah. Heidi, when you were growing up, you were exposed to computers.
Yeah. My dad was, my goodness, he was a lot higher ranking than he let on. Let's just put it that way for the longest time. But he was a computer engineer, and he's 83 years old now, and he worked on computers that took up whole warehouses, like those old-time movies, and all the way up until... he built every computer I ever owned except for the one that I own today. And I mean, it's just mind-blowing to me, some of the things that he was able to accomplish and do. So I remember growing up, and there were always computers around when having a home computer just it was non-existent. People just didn't own them. And I, at one point, counted 55 monitors in my family's home growing up. So, I've always kind of been around them. I always heard the hum, that high-pitched whining that you described, and it's like that. It's a presence. It's something I'm so familiar with. It was just a constant. But in the Air Force, he was an Air Force senior non-commissioned officer, and he ran a NORAD station, and so he let's just say he had some interesting roles going on, but it's just kind of odd. Here I'm writing books about the UFOs and aliens, and here's my dad running such a thing. But yeah, so I definitely have always been familiar with that presence of computers in particular.
Yeah, Maureen, what about yourself growing up? Were you exposed to anything that might have tuned you into being able to see and intuit feelings from other people? Was there anything formative in your life?
Yeah, I think so. We believe now that perhaps all people are born synesthetes, but at 4 months, this pruning goes on among hyperconnected neurons in infants that leaves only 4% of us that hyper-connected. And that seems to be one of the bases of synesthesia. So from childhood, I just would literally feel the pain of other people, or their joy became my joy. But it's a physical response. It's not just an emotional one. That's the difference with mirror touch synesthetes.
Yeah. I was going to say, Maureen, with this Machine Empath title, I've had a lot of people since that came out, the article that she wrote came out, people saying, oh, I zap computers too. I zap street lights and all these different things. And one thing I've noticed over the years, people that are involved in the paranormal or UFOs, this is something I've heard over the years. And I remember way back in the day, Coast to Coast Art Bell days, they called us streetlight inhibitors or sliders. And it's like to have that ability. And they thought, oh, it's, some kind of side effect of having been in touch with aliens and this, and that. And I'm like, I don't know what it is. But I know that Maureen was talking about defining different levels of machine empath methods, or there has to be different levels of it, because there's the people that zap things, there's the people that may communicate with them as well, or feel them, from my understanding. So it sounds like Maureen's got a lot more writing to do to define these different levels that are going on. It's fascinating to me.
All right. Well, if you have questions for our guest tonight, just call 85-KGRA live. We'll pull you on, get you screened, listen to your cue, and we'll be ready to roll. So our first caller tonight is Ron from Minnesota. Ron, how are you?
Hey, Alan. How you doing?
Very good, very good. What's your question for Heidi and Maureen?
Very good topic tonight. I don't know why I'm hearing myself. Hold on. I hear myself. It must be this here. Maybe. No, I got mine off. Anyway. Let me go. The electromagnetic interference, basically, what it would be when you interfere with the TV or electronics. Do we have to be on the same frequency, or is it just generic? As far as frequency.
Can you rephrase the question, Ron?
Yeah. Do we have to be on the same frequency of the TV, for instance? When I was younger, my dad used to
like your brain waves, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I would have that interference with the old TV, but not
Maureen and Heidi. What do you think? Do you think that our brain waves or our body is on a certain frequency that matches something like a TV, that creates a connection or interference?
I'll toss that to Maureen.
I think that's fascinating. Perhaps it is, because TVs are manufactured to be within our hearing range and our visual range, and we've created them. They're not broadcasting in UV or infrared, right? They're within our sensory range. So perhaps there are certain energetic things that match up. I would love to see a study on that.
Yeah. So Ron, have you had that sort of experience yourself?
Not recently, with the exception of my car radio.
Mm-hmm.
So that I have heard some strange stuff happening, and just normally it would be clear, but then for some reason it would go static, for one reason or another. Where normally it would be clear.
Did you ever feel anything, like a sensation at all when that would happen?
Not that I can realize.
Mm-hmm.
And
all right,
so
Ron, another question at all?
No, I think that's about it. Very good topic. Thank you for the guest. Thank you, Ellen.
Thanks.
All right, absolutely. Thanks, Ron. Have a good night.
Happy
all right, take care.
Bye.
So I had a similar experience. I had a friend of mine when I was much younger, and when we would walk down the street, this happened on several occasions, the streetlights would just go off. And we just, it was only when I was with this other person. It didn't happen. Yeah. And so is that a special kind of, is that reported where not just an individual has this this ability, or I'm not sure if ability is the right word, but it's enhanced or only exists when there are two energies come together.
That's
Heidi?
really interesting. Your combined force field, you know? Must
That's
be.
wild. That's wild. Yeah, that's the streetlight inhibitors, the sliders.
Right.
I've
never heard of it before.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. When I lived in the country and I'm walking and it's dark out and it's only streetlights and it's like zap. I'm like, I am in the absolute pitch black. It was so frustrating. So I hadn't heard of it being conjoined personally over the years. But I've met a lot of people who had things go haywire. When it came to electronics. But it's been such a. I told Maureen that I'm confused sometimes where to draw the line if it's paranormal, poltergeist, or this machine interference thing going on. Because like for instance, Maureen just spoke to one of my friends the other day, and she got a brand new iPad. She didn't even get to put her name in it. She turned it on, and her iPad started playing one of my podcasts she didn't even know I had. Mm-hmm. She just turned it on. I'm like, and she couldn't get it to stop, mind you. There's nothing she could do to get it to stop. Every time there was just nothing. I mean, all she could do was turn the volume down. But it's like, what is that? I talking to my sister on the phone about something in regards to heavenly stuff, and all of a sudden her computer turns completely white, and big words go across the screen as if it was paying attention to what we're talking about, and it said, "Only God is eternal." It's like, what? What on earth is going on here? It's like, is that paranormal? Is that I don't know. It's like, what is that? But it's been really increased these past several months. So I'm just I'm feeding into the positive to say it could be something that does protective, angelic, even during these really difficult times.
Oftentimes people say that when they were younger, they had these weird kind of paranormal experiences, psychic connections with people. They could see auras, intuition, energies. And then as they get older, it fades away. And I think most of the time we say, well, people just stop believing in that sort of thing. But a lot of people that I've spoken to are people that are still completely open to all of this that we're discussing tonight. And yet still, with age, it's sort of been snuffed out. And that, they just don't have those. I mean, like I said, I haven't had that light experience in, a very long time. And I had experience when I was younger where I was talking to somebody about their Reiki training sessions, and it was like a jolt of electricity transferred between the two of us. It was so bizarre. In those heightened states of conversation, I remember when I was young, a lot of strange things occurred. Why don't we have that when we're older? Or why do some of us lose that?
I think, Maureen, you did say that the others were millennials.
I think that's interesting. You are the den mother of the Machine Empaths as a slightly more mature woman. And, it may be that millennials are so in tune with technology anyway, and maybe there's a stronger connection
and then my exposure
way.
And my exposure to computers with my dad. That makes sense. Yeah.
Heidi, you also described sort of managing these happenings, right? Because you things would go haywire. So how did you deal with that?
Gosh, well, like I said, I had my dad fix things a lot, and learning to calm myself, because I think a lot of people who would have things go haywire, they notice like they could be overly happy or sad or just excited when these things would happen more often, and they would just notice that, it's going according to my emotions. But not always for me. And it was so aggravating. And I'm like, okay. So I would strike up conversation. I could look like a crazy person, or I'm talking, within and just like, really kind of pushing, hey, I really need this to work right now, or I'll even bless it. I'll bless the object, whatever it is. Like, I need you to really, this is not the time, and have, and like create this rapport essentially to be able to get what it was I needed out of anything. I mean, I'd had a situation with my car where it started banging wildly. I mean, oh my God, it was just shaking so hard. I'm on the Ozark Mountains, and I'm like, this is not the time. Like, it was just rocking side to side, and it's like I had my friends in the van, and we're just like, everybody say tight, tight, tight. We're all saying tight, 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 and it stopped. And it never happened again. So there's also this element of having no doubts and having expectations, objects to work too. So it was, that's the pushback. That's the that link of, we're not going to do this today. And it's worked for me, it really has. So I guess that's the different element when it comes to this machine empathy thing. And again, I didn't know where Maureen was going with any of this stuff, and she's just like, tell me some of your experiences. I'm like, well, this and that, and lo and behold, this conclusion has it's so new for me to be talking about. It really is. It's a topic that I'm just blown away by personally, and I'm just really enjoying it as much as everybody else is listening to Maureen and learning about synesthesia.
Absolutely. It's fascinating for me too. Like I said at the start, it's sort of a new field within the field of paranormal. If you're okay with that phrase, Maureen, because I know you're more science oriented, but I think it does sound like it belongs in the paranormal world. And you were recently on Coast to Coast, correct?
Yes, I was. I was sort of under spiritual attack or something on the show. 2 phones failed. My dog started barking. I had a major coughing fit, worse than I'm having tonight. And it was wild, but no, it was great. It was an honor, like it is to be with you. And George Norrie is a synesthete. He talked about all the colors he associates with letters.
Wow, interesting.
But yeah, you're right in terms of I kind of bristle at the word paranormal, and it's not because I'm not down with everything you're exploring. I am fascinated by it. It's because I think these things are normal. I do. I don't think they're common experiences, but I think if you really talk with people, everybody has a little bit of this in their life, right? And so why do we compartmentalize it and put it over there? If I may. I mean, no disrespect. I know it's the title of your show, and it's really it's the accepted terminology. I'm not going against that, but I'm trying to compliment you in a way that this is part of being human. And I get on my soapbox, but these forces, these magic, if you will, have been secreted away from the common man and the common woman. But I'm here to tell you, at the highest levels of government, military, intelligence, Fortune 500 companies, they use psychics, they use remote viewers, all manner of things. So why the man and the woman on the street need to be called paranormal, not that it's a dirty word, but you know what I mean? I don't think there should be this compartmentalizing of society.
Oh no, I get it. And it wouldn't be the first time that I've questioned the title of my own show.
In a way, I'm glad it's the title, because I would go right to it. It would mean, oh, this is alternative, cool content. But I'm just trying to say, maybe these things are more normal than we've been led to believe, right? It's like the child who has the imaginary friend until his parents shut him down, right? No, you don't really have a friend like that. You're imagining it. It's not real, right? And I just think it should be about opening pathways and not shutting them down.
Right. And I'm a big believer.
If I may also, it's a little tangential, but I think it's so important. You know, Heidi is very lighthearted and she's very humble, but I have been observing her for a couple of months now. And I think the story is that Heidi is saintly, and she does spiritual battle on a daily basis with these entities that, you know, the top exorcists in the Vatican probably would have a problem with. And I just think she's extraordinary. And another observation I would like to make is when we talk about biblical or other old-timey type stories, I think a lot of people in society think, well, that was then, and it's some sort of different paradigm now, right? Like someone couldn't walk on water in 2020. But I think Heidi is an amazing update of the saints and the gifted people of yore. And to provide some evidence of this, I feel you blushing. My cheeks are blushing too.
Oh, yes, I am.
She has internal stigmata in her hands and wrists that match the nails of the crucifixion of Christ.
Wait, I didn't know this.
Yeah, she doesn't talk about it. That's why I'm outing her.
Yeah, she is tossing me out there.
You are a Christian.
Yes. Yeah. My goodness, Maureen. Yeah, I'm always a little bit like it's something so different for me to speak about, and I'm definitely humbled. I mean, it's something that I learned about a couple of years ago, and you know, being an occupational therapist, when I saw my X-rays, I'm like, what on earth is that? And to see it in one wrist, and then to see it in the exact same spot in the other one, and then to look it up and to find there's only been 3 others reported like this, I'm like, okay. So I just kind of tucked that away, and you know, lo and behold, Maureen comes into the fold, and she's like, oh my goodness, that is, that I don't think it's a coincidence with you taking on and owning essentially the names of the Hat Man, the devil in the world today. It is kind of odd circumstances, and I just figure, you know, if it helps inspire in some way, or maybe it helps me in some way and being able to do what I'm doing, you know, yay. But yeah, it's something that I have, and I don't know how to categorize it personally.
Well, it's not easy to categorize. I mean, whether it's religion, because I talk about this a lot, you know, that religion and mythologies that go along with it are supernatural, right? I mean, the stories of beasts and entities and magic, you know, it all clump that into supernatural, paranormal, whatever, you know, and that, I mean, I didn't feel right calling my show abnormal now. So I'll stick with paranormal, but I just want to thank you both so much for coming on. And I really wish we had more time to discuss this tonight. It's so fascinating.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We'll have to come back. That's
honor.
all that means.
Yes. And
the more, honestly, it'd be cool.
Yeah, would I be wrong in assuming that maybe the two of you would work on a book together?
Oh, that would be a dream. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, a dream. I would be like so humbled. It'd just be mind blowing. I would absolutely love it.
No, I would love it too, because it's a field of interest now for me that's new, and there's really not much out there.
She's got books now. She's got another book coming out too, Maureen. Oh,
yeah,
gosh.
I have a book coming out for St. Martin's Press. It's due on my end in November, about all the extraordinary sensory capabilities humans have. So I know we're wrapping up here, but for example, we can all see light at the level of a single photon. They have proven that in laboratory settings.
Yeah.
So it's to circle back and kind of wrap a little bit. You know what you're talking about with paranormal or abnormal, and here I am using the word normal. You know, young people tell me, don't even use the word normal, Maureen. And I'm like, well, what should I say? And they say expected.
Expected.
There's expected and there's unexpected.
So a book is expected from both of you on Machine.
I love it. I love it.
All right. Well, thank you both again.
Thank you.
And please
Thank
be well.
you. You're such a thoughtful host. Thank you.
Yes. Thanks, Alan. This is great.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for listening tonight to Paranormal Now, Tuesdays, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on KGRA Radio. Of course, join us next week. And KGRA Radio, as a friendly reminder, is your official contact for the best in alternative talk radio. To find out more, go to kgraradio.com/paranormal now. Special thanks to KGRA producer Race Hobbs. And until next time, live in the mystery.